G'day folks, I'd like to give you today some tips and tricks for racing on platforms like Zwift and Rouvy. As you've seen on TCL recently, I've done a number of virtual races and I'd like to share a little bit of my experience with you. The first thing is be prepared to start fast. Okay, the starts of these virtual races are often very, very hard. Why is that? Because people in the race are trying to open up those gaps, the drafting effect kicks in, and if you're not in the front end of that race from the very start, you're very, very quickly behind the game. Okay, so what does that mean? You need to train. This is my second piece of advice for you. You need to be integrating into your training very intensive 2 to 5 minute efforts which replicate the start of these kind of races. Okay, however, a little bit of a caveat here. What's my third piece of advice for you? Don't start too hard. If you have not trained specifically for those very intensive upfront efforts of 2 to 5 minutes, you've been doing much more sort of tempo, longer interval training kind of work, don't try to go with the front group. Why? Because you will very quickly go into the red and you will blow up. You will burn your glycogen stores and you will find yourself in big trouble probably halfway into the race. Now for me personally, I do train for those kind of starts. Why? Because this year I was training for the cyclocross season, and a big part of cyclocross training is preparing for those really intensive starts and efforts. So my body is ready for it. If yours is not, then beware. Don't start too hard. Fourth piece of advice for you is know your 1 hour FTP. Many of us know our 20-minute FTP. We do our 20-minute FTP tests, and then we try to extrapolate some sort of average from that. Now, how do you extrapolate the average? Typically, you look at that 20-minute average, you multiply that, and then you take off about 5%, which is a rough sort of estimate. So you just really need to be conscious of that. Your predicted or estimated 1 hour FTP, and you need to be watching that you don't start too hard and then blow up part way through the race. Now, of course, this will also depend on the nature of the race. I've done several Rouvy races recently on the Pedal Italy series, which is a terrific series, really well organized. However, many of those races have essentially been uphill time trials. Why? Because we've been racing on climbs, for example, in the Dolomite. So what is that? It's a 5-minute start, through some flat roads and some small villages before you're onto a climb, and that climb may be up to 45 minutes long. So it's really like an uphill time trial. And if you do not know your 45-minute FTP on a climb like that, you're going to run into trouble. So you need to predict that, you need to understand that, and then base your ride upon the knowledge of what your body is capable of. Now, if the ride is more up and down, if it's more bumpy, you also need to have a little bit of an idea on the ability of your body to recover. So for me personally, I'm a punchy rider, I'm more of a rouleur. I know that I can dig very deep on shorter climbs of 5 to 8 minutes, go well into and above my threshold, and then recover on the descents and do it again, something I'm capable of physiologically. You need to have a little bit of knowledge about your own capabilities, your strengths and weaknesses. And that also comes down to choosing circuits which suit you best. My next piece of advice here, which is very, very important, is keep a high cadence. Okay? What happens if you're pushing too hard, pushing big gears, low cadence work, you're activating large muscle groups, and what you're doing there is burning your glycogen stores very quickly. Now, if you push big gears, and particularly if you go into over threshold efforts on those gears, you can pretty much burn up all of your glycogen stores within about 2 minutes of effort. Now that can be several efforts of 30 seconds, 40 seconds, whatever it might be. But once that glycogen is burned off, it takes time for it to be replenished. So everything you should be trying to do during a race is to hang on to, really try to keep those glycogen stores as long as possible, and a big part of that is helped with high cadence. So for me, I'm always aiming to sustain a cadence of somewhere between 90, 95 during a race, trying to preserve those glycogen stores. Now, another very, very important aspect here Final one, this is my fifth piece of advice for you, is around heat management. All right, you will overheat during an indoor race unless you are managing your ventilation and some little tips or tricks of keeping your core body temperature as low as possible during the event. There's some terrific research on this coming out recently showing that when your body temperature creeps up, so here what we're talking about is a body temperature, core temperature getting over 39, 40, 41 degrees, which is absolutely possible during indoor events, your power will drop off quite significantly. So once you get into those upper core temperature zones, what is happening? As you start to overheat, your body starts taking blood away from your muscles towards your core to try to cool down your body. Now, as that blood is pulled away from the muscles, your ability of those muscles to exert power declines. So that decline can be as dramatic as 10 to 15%. So what are we trying to do? The first thing, of course, is have good ventilation. 1, 2 fans to keep the air really moving over yourself. In recent indoor races, I've actually been pouring water down my back to accelerate that ventilation process. You may even use some ice to try to cool yourself down during the race. I've just got recently, and I'm going to give you an update on this soon, I've just acquired myself a core temperature sensor. So this is a little device which you attach to your heart rate strap, which actually helps you to track and record your core body temperature in real time. And that's incredibly useful and valuable during these indoor races. So I hope these tips and tricks have been helpful for you. If you've enjoyed them, please do give me the thumbs up, and of course, slam that subscribe button for this cycling life.